How much does the roast color of a coffee impact its flavor profile? Well, we know that how light or how dark a coffee is roasted is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, contributors and factors of how a coffee is going to end up tasting. It's no surprise why some people prefer dark roast, light roast, medium roast, even extra light roasts. However, I'm curious to see how much does it actually make a difference within a small window. I'm going to be tasting 4 different roasts of the same coffee. All these roasts are technically considered light roast. However, light roast does have a spectrum. So on one side, we're gonna have roasts that are leaning a little bit more developed within the light roast spectrum. And on the other side, we're gonna have coffees that are leaning lighter on the light roast spectrum. The way this reader works is very simple. You grind some coffee, you put your ground sample over the glass window right above the sensor. The reader gives you a number back and tells you where your coffee's sitting at in terms of color. This one read at a 30, this one read at a 29, this one read at a 26, 27, and this one read at a 25, 26. And when I say 26, 27, 25, 26, is that upon doing several readings, it would bounce back between the two. So there's a little bit of leeway right there, but these were pretty spot on with 30 and 29. All right, let's get started on the fun part. Let's pour these coffees and then get into some slurping. All right, we're just crossing the 12-minute mark on our cupping, and that's usually when I like to dive in and start tasting bowls. So let's get right into it. Wow. Okay, there is a noticeable difference as I'm moving through these cups right here. On this side right here, lovely coffee, lovely roast. I'm really enjoying this. It's delicate, it's very juicy, it's mouth-watering, it's light, airy. The acidity is just driving this coffee very nicely. The acidity is also sweet and just very, very pleasant. I like to think about roasts and flavors as a spectrum from acidity to bitterness, and coffees are a combination of both. Sometimes they're acidity heavy, sometimes they're more leaning towards bitterness, and the combination of the two and the balance of the two is what we perceive as sweetness. It's the flavors. This coffee right here is definitely leaning more towards acidity. It's more delicate, it's lighter bodied, it's juicy. It's just damn good. Moving on to the second cup right here. Now these two colors are very, very close together. Of course, this one, knowing that this one has been resting for about 4 weeks, this one was roasted, I think just last week or under a week ago. It's tasting very similar. It's got nice, juicy acidity. It's got, it just has a lot of the similar qualities. However, you can taste that it's leaning a little towards that bitterness. There's a little bit more body. There's a little bit more sweetness coming through on this cup. But this is still a very, very pleasing cup. The difference between these two is very, very small, very minor. I think it would be much harder to tell these two apart if I didn't just have them right next to each other. So they're very similar in flavor. All right, moving on to this third cup right here. This is where things get interesting and start to stand out very much so from these other two bowls. What I'm picking up here is there's a lot more sweetness. There's a lot more of that on acidity to bitterness is definitely leaning more towards bitterness. Not in a bad way though. It has much more bodied than, let's say, this first bowl right here. It just got punch. It's got a little bit more thickness in the flavor profile. The zesty acidity that you're getting out of this, that which we call on our flavor notes gooseberry or grape, like a little bit of tart, this roast is definitely starting to tame that acidity a little more. So it's still coming through because it's the natural characteristics of the coffee. However, it's definitely being tamed. It's definitely being held back a little bit, where now there's a lot more sweetness coming through. The coffee is, again, tasting more well-rounded. So moving on to this last cup, this is definitely has a lot more bodied. It's got a lot more sweetness. It's just big in your mouth. The acidity that this cup has, it's being very much so tamed. Like, it's still coming through because that's what the coffee still has. It has that gooseberry tart brightness in it. However, this roast is definitely kind of taming it and holding it back. Something I would think about is if you're looking for a little bit more of a espresso roast or something that's gonna cut through milk a little better, whether that's on drip coffee, if you're just adding some milk, or in a cappuccino cortado, this is probably a little bit more fitting than, let's say, this roast right here. This roast actually probably would not taste good with milk in there. I mean, it would taste phenomenal as just a straight espresso shot, but definitely would be a little iffy with milk. However, the body in this coffee and the thickness and kind of the more sweetness driven flavor profile here would work much better with milk. So depending on what you want out of your coffee and how you're going to brew it, you might lean towards one direction over the other. So just because somebody says, oh, it's a light roast, well, honestly, that's starting to become very vague. Like that will give you a general direction. Again, all of these are kind of tasting in the similar ballpark. However, these two outside bowls are definitely have their unique characteristics and presentation of flavors. So hopefully this was interesting, informative, and intriguing to you. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, if you want to pick up some tasty coffees, we're roasting some good stuff down below. There's a link. But otherwise, remember, as we always say, reflect what's good.